Before we begin, tell me where you're watching from and how old you are. If stories of World War II human resilience and untold perspectives speak to you, subscribe, leave a comment, and share this with someone who loves history. Your support helps bring more real, intimate narratives of people who lived through the war's aftermath. Across the ruins of Europe, church bells rang, rifles cracked into the air, and banners promised liberation. For millions, 6 brutal years of total war were finally over. But for a particular group of young women standing in the soot-stained shadows of German railway yards, this day did not feel like triumph. It felt like a summons. Their uniforms were threadbare remnants, gray-green skirts and jackets of the Wehrmacht auxiliaries, the Helferinnen, boots cracked from miles of retreat, hair matted by smoke and rain. Some were barely 20, their faces still holding the last quiet traces of youth beneath fatigue and grime. They had been typists, secretaries, radio operators, nurses, cogs in a military machine that devoured their country and then collapsed in their hands. With the Reich broken, they were not sent home. They were herded into trains for captivity. The image was strange even to themselves. Lines of women in uniform dragging dented suitcases toward dark wooden boxcars once used to send troops to the front. Some clutched rosaries, others held ration tins. Many had nothing but torn papers and the clothes on their backs. A girl from Hamburg whispered to her companion, "The Americans will make examples of us." She had heard it from an officer during the chaos of surrender. Another, taller, and hardened by years at an anti-aircraft searchlight battery, said nothing, jaw set as if bracing for a blow. They had been told again and again that the Allies, especially the Americans, were wolves. Captivity, they were warned, would mean degradation, cruelty, perhaps worse. The trains rumbled west through a burned-out world. Charred towns slid past like ghosts. Church spires were shattered stumps. Bridges lay folded into icy rivers. Skeletal factories still smoldered. On embankments, children waved, their faces as thin as paper. At night, when the train halted in some nameless siding, the women huddled for warmth, listening to bootsteps outside and the far-off crack of gunfire. One of them, a former secretary from Munich, kept a small diary hidden in her skirt lining. Anna wrote, "We are being taken far. None knows where. My mother will think I am dead. Perhaps I will be." The journey ended not in a German camp, but in the chaos of occupied ports, Bremen, Le Havre, Cherbourg, where American ships waited beneath a lattice of cranes and smoke. The women marched up gangways under watch, past soldiers whose expressions they could not read. They expected snarls, insults, blows. Instead, there was order, paperwork, lines, numbers stamped on cards. It felt less like vengeance than a machinery of procedure they did not understand. Still, as the engines vibrated to life and the coastline of Europe shrank to a smudge, dread settled in. The Atlantic stretched wide and endless. America, distant and mythic, lay somewhere beyond the horizon. Enemy caricature turned place on a map. Seasickness took many on the crossing. In the steel holds, the bunks were stacked tight, the air thick with salt and diesel. Food arrived on metal trays, pale bread, a ladle of meat stew, a steaming mug of coffee. The women stared. For years they had eaten ersatz bread, cabbage stalks, watery soup drawn from rusted cans. Some hesitated, suspecting trickery. Others devoured it, tears cutting clean paths through the soot on their faces. "They feed us like they feed themselves," someone whispered, astonished. Kindness was not what they expected. Punishment would have been easier to believe. Land appeared at last in a haze, then sharpened into a skyline untouched by bombs. New York Harbor, Boston, New Orleans, each city rose immaculate, intact, alive. The Statue of Liberty slid past like a bitter irony to eyes raised from the deck. Crowds lined the piers. Some jeered, many only watched. Boots thudded on wooden planks as the women were marched ashore under guard. The air smelled different, cleaner, full of salt and sun, but not of ash. For the first time, some sensed how completely their world had collapsed. Germany was rubble. America was not. Buses and trains carried them inland to POW camps spread across the United States. Fort Oglethorpe in Georgia, Camp Ruston in Louisiana, and dozens more. Roads unfurled between green fields and towns where children pedaled bicycles past white porches. For women who had watched their own cities burn, the sight was almost incomprehensible. They whispered, "Was this truly the land of monsters? Could such abundance be real?" The Third Reich had promised victory and delivered ruins. The enemy seemed to live in another universe altogether. At the gates, the routine tightened. Names were recorded, possessions catalogued, uniforms exchanged for plain work clothes. But before they settled into barracks, there was a final step. Guards, firm but not brutal, directed them into a low building where steam hissed behind tiled walls. The women's hearts pounded. This surely was the humiliation they had been promised. The line moved slowly, one clutching her suitcase like a shield, another crossing herself in silence. When Anna stepped through the door, her expectations collided with reality. Bars of soap, thick and white, were pressed into their hands. Towels followed. Then hot water showered down, washing weeks of grime from hair and skin. Some wept openly, the sound echoing off the tiles. Others laughed, a nervous, disbelieving sound. It was not degradation, but restoration, and it shook them to the core. That night, Anna wrote by the dim bunk light, "We were told we would be mocked and broken. Instead, we were given soap. How can this be? In the mess?" Hall the next day, the shock multiplied. The room smelled of coffee and fresh bread. Long tables groaned with trays of boiled potatoes, carrots, beef stew, soft rolls gleaming with butter. Steam fogged the windows. A cook in a white apron slid plates across a counter, filled tin cups with coffee. The women stood as though confronted with a trap. Some could not meet the cook's eye. Others stared at the food, unsure it was real. In Germany, the final winter had reduced meals to sawdust bread, turnip broth, perhaps a scrap of horse meat. Here, inside an enemy camp, one plate held more than a week's ration back home. Anna dipped her spoon into the stew, lips trembling. The grease shone on top. Chunks of meat glistened. She tasted it and pressed a hand to her mouth as though ashamed. Around her, tears slid down quiet faces. "My brothers starved in the snow," someone whispered, "and here they feed us, like this." There were no taunts, no jeering. Guards paced the aisles with a kind of professional detachment, accents softened by drawl or Midwestern flatness. The expected humiliation never arrived. Instead came the unbearable normalcy of being fed. Days settled into routine. A bell woke them at dawn. Breakfast line, work detail, supper, lights out. Some labored in the kitchens, others in fields beyond the wire, others in the laundry where American uniforms were scrubbed and pressed. They were paid small wages in camp script that could be exchanged at the canteen. The shelves inside were the most bewildering sight of all. Chocolate bars, cigarettes, pencils, notebooks, even lipstick in glossy tubes. A few stood before the display as though before an altar. A bar of chocolate felt like a miracle. Lipstick, unthinkable. Yet the enemy offered it for work. Letters from home trickled in, censored and late. The words stung. "We live in the cellar now. The house above is gone. We boil weeds for soup. If you have anything, send it." The women folded those pages with shaking fingers, knowing they could not send food, only replies. The moral gulf widened daily. Their families scavenged for scraps. Cities lay in ashes. Children picked through rubble for bread. Meanwhile, the camp functioned with American order. Food on time, soap in the washroom, a doctor's visit if fever rose. Some prisoners felt shame heavier than chains. The Reich had demanded loyalty, sent them to man radios and searchlights, and left them hungry. America, sworn enemy, gave them stew and soap. Not all adjusted easily. A few refused to eat, hoarding crusts beneath their pillows, certain the generosity concealed a trick. Rumors spread, the stew drugged, the soap tainted. Yet nothing followed except the quiet grind of days. The body did what bodies do. Skin cleared, lice vanished, cheeks filled. Even those who clung to distrust found their resistance worn thin by ordinary decency. The greatest cruelty, many began to think, was to be treated with dignity. The Americans, too, watched with curiosity. Many guards had only known Germans through wartime caricature. They were surprised to meet thin, exhausted young women, often frightened, many barely older than their own sisters. One wrote in a letter home, "They look at us as if waiting for a blow that never comes." Encounters gathered, small and unremarkable, but powerful. A flashlight dropped at roll call. Anna stooped, handed it back. Their fingers brushed, a nod passed between enemies. A soldier humming a tune while crossing the laundry yard. The melody drifted, and a girl from Cologne hummed along, a ragged harmony rising over steaming tubs. A sergeant muttered to a colleague, "You'd forget for a minute they were the enemy if you didn't see the tags." More often now, the women were taken outside the wire under escort to pick cotton in nearby fields, to tidy municipal parks, to scrub benches and canneries. American towns unspooled past truck rails, storefronts flashing goods in full windows, bakeries venting sweet air, movie posters pasted on brick, children laughing on sidewalks, radios blaring baseball scores and jazz. To women whose last image of a city was cratered streets and charred beams, the vision was overwhelming. One day, church volunteers offered lunch in a parish hall, sandwiches stacked on platters, bowls of apples and oranges, pies cooling on windowsills. The women hovered, hands unsure. "Eat, eat," urged an elderly woman in a flour-dusted apron. Anna bit into a crisp apple and nearly wept. She had not tasted fruit since 1942. In her head, her mother's voice murmured, "Save the peel for soup." At night, back in the barracks, conversations grew heavier. They spoke of ruins and relatives, of little brothers lost to the east, of mothers burning furniture for heat. Some began to say aloud what they had not dared. Perhaps their nation had lied. Perhaps they had not been sacrificed for glory, but fed into a machine that ground hope to dust. "We were taught they were beasts," a woman murmured into her blanket. "But who are the beasts now? Those who bombed our homes? Or those who built this world of plenty?" No one answered. Silence held more weight than words. The camp canteen became the heart of the contradiction. With their small wages, they bought jam, a pencil, a cheap mirror. Anna placed a square of chocolate on her tongue and closed her eyes. Sweetness burst like a memory of childhood, and shame flushed her face. Nearby, a girl smeared lipstick and stared into the mirror with disbelief. "I feel human again," she whispered, as if confessing a sin. The Geneva Convention existed now not as a line in a pamphlet, but as coffee, bread, medical checks, pay slips, fair treatment under military police. That fact gnawed at them. The enemy's rule of law had restored what their own regime had abandoned. The mirror delivered the hardest truth. The women's bodies changed. Starved angles softened. Hair regained its luster. Color returned to skin. Some looked younger, as if captivity had peeled away years of war. To see themselves restored was to face an indictment they could not deflect. The enemy had made them healthy. Their own nation had made them starve. It was a revelation and a rebuke at once. Rumors of repatriation began as a murmur and grew to a buzz. Winter edged in. Frost laced the fences. Names would be called, someone said. A transport would leave soon, another whispered. The thought of returning to rubble, to cellars and ash, filled many with dread they scarcely dared voice. "I am afraid to go back," someone said in the dark. It sounded like treason. It sounded true. Anna opened her diary and wrote words she had never written before. "I fear leaving more than I feared arriving." On a cold morning the list was read. The women crowded in the yard, breath pluming like smoke, heartbeats loud beneath wool coats. A sergeant's voice carried in flat syllables. Name by name, each sounded like a verdict. Between barracks windows glowed pale, and beyond the wire the fields shone silver with frost. When Anna heard her name, she stepped forward. The true conflict, she understood in that breath, was no longer between nations. It was inside her, in the space where hatred had lived and where something fragile, dangerous, undeniable, had begun to take root. Buses rolled through the gate crowned with barbed wire. Engines grumbled, tires crushed frost. The camp receded, guard towers, swept paths, neat rows of barracks. Inside the bus, the women clasped their tags and stared straight ahead. Outside, an American sergeant lifted a hand in a small, awkward farewell. No speeches, no grand gesture, only the rhythm of an orderly system returning people to a broken map. The road back east ran through towns, still bright in winter light. Children tossed snowballs in front yards. A man shoveled a sidewalk, paused, and leaned on his shovel to watch the convoy pass. By noon, the buses reached a rail yard where freight cars waited under gray sky. Papers were checked. Names matched to lists. The women climbed aboard and found their places. Somewhere in the distance, a bell tolled the hour. Anna touched the diary hidden in her coat and thought of the small things that had undone her certainty. A bar of soap, a square of chocolate, hot water on her scalp, the nod of a young guard, the taste of an apple. None of it erased the ruins of Munich. None of it absolved the suffering at home. And yet it had changed her, deep beneath anger and grief, in a place she could not close again. The train lurched forward. Wheels struck seams in the track with a steady clatter. America slid away behind them. Unbombed streets, full windows, the hum of radios in the night. Ahead lay Germany. Cellars and ration lines, letters folded with shaking hands, the work of starting again. The women did not speak much. They did not need to. Each held the same unsaid realization. Survival was no longer the only question. The real challenge would be what captivity had revealed. About the enemy, about home, about themselves. When darkness fell, the car grew quiet. Somewhere a woman began humming a tune picked up from a guard's radio months before. Another voice joined, ragged at first, then steadier. The melody threaded through the wood and iron like a seam laid true after a long tear. Anna did not sing. She listened, hand on the diary, as the words wrote themselves without ink. Hatred had been a fortress. Dignity had slipped past the walls. And on the other side, something human waited, unpromised, unasked for, but real. If this story moved you, share your thoughts below. Where are you reading from, and what did this perspective change for you about WOM history and the people inside it? Subscribe for more human stories of the war's aftermath, POW camps in America, post-war Europe, repatriation, resilience, and share this with someone who cares about seeing history through the eyes of those who lived it.